In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make these super long 12-foot box beams or barn beams. They're distressed on the ends, they have a long miter fold, and I'll show you how to get these perfect edges using this secret weapon right here. This is a Domino, which is a loose tenon. I'm going to show you how to do it. You won't even need to use the packing tape method where you tape the seams and fold it over and fumble around with it and then have to peel off any tape. Alright, so let's get started. Because I'm in a smaller shop and I'm going to be using the track saw to rip the straight line, I'm going to rip the straight line, flip the board over to the other side so that I can cut the bevel for the long miter. And then I have to do two of those like this, so I'm going to put those to the side, and then I have to do a double bevel on a 7-inch board so that I have the 5.5 inches in the middle for my nailer boards that are already set on the ceiling. So because I'm going to be making a lot of cuts, I have my 5 amp hour batteries that should last me for at least 40 to 50 cuts. And I have my other batteries on the charger. They're charging while I use this. So I've got my first board here. Put it up against my stops there. I'll put the crown out towards me so that I can rip a straight line. And if you haven't seen the reason that I do that with the crown out, then watch my video on ripping a straight line for boards that are too big for your jointer. I'll show you and tell you why I do that. Pop in my batteries. Got my saw set to 90 right now because I'm going to be doing the straight line rip first, because I need a long reference edge to measure against. I'm going to take a pencil and mark that straight edge that I just cut. This way I know when I put that board back up to bevel my saw, I need to cut it on the opposite end to get that bevel and measure alongside the reference edge that I just cut. It's more productive for me to make the straight cuts first. This way I can bevel the saw and then make multiple beveled cuts, and then I can move a lot quicker that way. If I keep tipping the saw, locking it in, tipping the saw back and forth, I'm wasting a lot of time. Now this board has the crown on this side, so I'll flip it over this way. This way I can get rid of that crown first. Okay, so now I just ripped the straight line on the second board. Now I need to make a bevel cut on this board, the board that I previously cut, and then I already have a 7-inch board that I have to make a double bevel on. So now I will bevel the saw to 45. First, I'll get the track out of the way, put it up here because this is my reference edge. I need to flip it over so I can measure off of that and make a mark at 8 inches. Eight inch there. I usually do one in the middle of the board. Gives me more reference for the middle of the track. Do the bevels. I like to clamp the board in place because this is going to be a cut to the final dimension. Now, not that the track is going to move, but when I set it here, I got it right where I need it, right there. When I lock this side in with the clamps, now I start going down here to the other side. That doesn't move on me, and I don't have to keep going back and forth and fiddling with it. Now to bevel the saw. So first thing I need to do is I need to lower the depth of the blade. Otherwise, when I make the cut, it's not going to go all the way through. I always look down here to make sure I'm not going to hit anything. I'm on sacrificial boards. So I loosen up the depth. I bring it down so that I know I'm going to make a cut into the board. Then I loosen these two positive stops on the saw, two thumb wheels here, and then I just crank it over to 45. Once it hits that positive stop on 45, lock it in. Okay, now if I had the Makita track, then I could pull that little tab out that has a washer on it and the saw wouldn't tip because it has a little lip. Festool doesn't have that, so what I do as I run the saw is I just keep my hand, which is completely away from the blade, along the back of the track there. And that'll keep the saw from tipping as I go, because that will destroy your angle. All right, what I'm gonna do, loosen that up. Now I don't even have to take the clamps back out. I just loosen them up, move them off to the side. They slip out of the way. With my saw. Now I think that you will agree this is a much quicker and less dusty technique to get the miter fold on these boards. So now I just do a quick check on the board, make sure that I hit my mark. Exactly 8 inches. 8-inch workpiece here. And throw it up on the table, and this is why I mark the board, so that I don't forget this is my reference edge. Drop this down. Okay, so now this board is already cut to the width I need. So I'm going to just take the tracks and I'm going to line it right up against the edge of the board, and I'm going to zero it out so there's no material sticking out at all. So I'm going to bring it right to the edge and flush that zero guide up over here. I'm going to tighten this up. I'm going to start to work my way down the board to zero everything out. Okay, really quick before I cut the other side, here's where you got to pay attention. When you're doing a double bevel, this bevel is going in. I need this bevel to be replicated on this side. So if I was just to flip this board over without paying attention, and I cut the bevel, it's going to be opposite this and the piece is wasted. You have to take the board, keep it with the same face down, and you're going to have to spin it around. Hopefully you have enough room to do that. Hopefully you have more room than I do, because it gets a little bit crazy in here. The reason I have this already cut to the 7 inches is because I had planned on doing the rabbet joints with the router and the edge guide. But since that didn't work out, I still have these 7-inch boards and I don't want to waste them. And since this guide rail system and this track saw cut perfectly on the same plane when the saw is at 90 and 45, all I have to do is zero the track out to the edge and I can maintain the measurement that I have. Like I said, for the joinery of the miter folds, I'm going to be using Domino's. I'm going to use a 5x30 Domino, not sponsored by Festool. Bought that with my own money, so just so you know. I'm not advertising here. You don't have to do this. If you're going to do a miter fold, you can do it with just glue and tack it together with nails, or you can just put a couple of the trim screws in it, or you could just clamp it and leave it and it'll be strong enough. This is not a support beam. This is hollow. It's a faux beam, so there's no structural support for the house on this. It's completely for design. All right, so the first thing I want to do here is just get the edges lined up as straight as possible. All right, so I don't need to make a mark on the ends here because I'm going to reference off of the edge and use the tab on the domino, butt it up against the edge on this side, and when I plunge in, what happens is it makes it perfectly even from that edge on both sides, because it's like having a stop block. So it's very repeatable. So that'll be my tight setting. So I'm gonna make this, I'm gonna put a T here for tight setting, and everything else is gonna be on the loose setting, and that will help with assembly because I won't have to try and jam it together. With the loose setting on the domino, you'll have wiggle room on both sides. Now the face of it will still be structurally strong. You'll have face grain, long grain to long grain connection. But side to side, you'll have some lateral movement there. So what I'm going to do is just put a mark. So I'm going to have a domino there, probably about every foot or so. So I'm just going to take a straight edge, and I'm just going to mark a line on both pieces, just so I know where, I have a reference of where the plate, the center of the plate, it will tell me where the bit is going to cut. And being that it's a loose setting, you're taking your eye out of the picture. You're not relying on getting it dead on. So if you're off by just a little bit in each direction, that loose setting with the lateral tolerance will take up the slack and it'll be fine. It'll go right together. So we're not going to go crazy here. I'm going to go about every 2 feet or so. So two things you always want to make sure is that you set your angle on the plate first, and then you set the depth by loosening it up and dropping the plate down to wherever you want it. Right now I have it set to go in 15 millimeters into each of the workpieces because I'm using a 5x30 domino. So as I plunge in, that will get me just slightly more than halfway through the material without blowing out the other side. So I'll get the most out of it. You always have to be hooked up to dust collection, and you definitely have to wear hearing protection and eye protection. This thing's just about as loud as a router, but without the dust collection on there, it will not clean out the mortise and it will burn out your bit. So definitely always hook it up to dust collection. I have the vacuum right now hooked up to a vac switch, and what happens with that vac switch, and I'll post this in the description also for a link to it. When I turn on this tool, the vacuum will automatically come on as I switch on the tool. So we're going to start off with the tight mortise here, then I'm going to turn it to the loose setting while the tool's running and just go down the line where I made my marks. The reason I have the domino so far up at the top of the miter is if you bring it down too much, it's either going to blow out through the miter because you don't have enough meat here, or it's going to telegraph through the wood itself. And we want to try to avoid that as much as possible. Bringing it up here like this also is going to take out that, that slack of you trying to jam it together at the point if you did have it too low. So now the reason I mark it, this is important because I know this is on the tight setting. I have to make this on the tight setting. But here's the problem. When I put these together and I made the marks, this one was here in the front. Now I'm not going to come from this side with the domino. If I had more room, I can walk around. I don't have to worry too much about that. But what I have to do now is pick this up, switch it with the other board, and flip it around. Okay, so now I flipped the board over and I had the bevel towards me, and here are the markings that I made, so I know that I'm going to cut on these lines here. But the most important thing that I was telling you about with the marking of the tight and the loose fitting is, see how I have the tight fitting over here now on that side? I have to do the same thing on this board in the same exact spot that that's going to sit attached to this, which is now at the end of that board down there. So what a lot of people do, they make a mistake. They don't mark it like this, and then they flip the board over and they start and they make their tight setting there. And then the board doesn't line up later on. And then you just mortise a bunch of holes for no reason. And trust me, if you don't do a dry fit during glue up and you try to glue that up, you're going to be in a world of trouble. The main reason to mark these is so you don't get confused, okay? So now you'll see how everything will come together. But here is the first board we cut the dominoes in. This is T1. That was the tight setting, the first board. That made it up with this side of the middle. So this is going to be the bottom. This is the bevel on both sides. You can see T1 and T1, they will match up here. And that says T2 for the tight fitting. That's the end of this board. And we bring that in to this side here. So now that I have everything in the orientation I need all laid out, I'll run a bead of glue. We'll put in some dominoes in one of the boards here, and then we'll flip it up. And as it mates with the other side, I'll be able to take a rubber mallet and just tap it together and force it into the other side, and do the same thing on that side. And then I will apply some clamping pressure to really squeeze it together, and then I'll tack nail it in place with some brads. This way I can flip it around and start to roll over those edges with the barrel of a screwdriver, or the shank if you will. Let's keep that there. And now the same technique on this side. Joints are pretty tight with just the domino, so I'm going to pull this towards the edge, and I'm going to attempt to flip it over, just so I can flip it with no problem. Out and over. Real quick, while the glue is still wet, I'm going to work over these edges with the shank of a screwdriver. It's got to be a round shank because that'll help you to mash the fibers of the wood together on the corners. Next thing I've done is cut some spacer blocks, and these are going to fit in here. They're made to be really pretty snug, and they're going to be forced all the way down, and because they're so snug they're going to be glued in. And what that does is, when you make a beam like this, I have the 5.5 inch inside here, and my nailer boards are 5.5 inches, and these are going to want to pinch in a little bit. So right now the top without this piece in here is just slightly, maybe a 32nd or a 64th of an inch under 5.5. So I cut these spacer blocks to slightly over 5.5, and what that's going to do is, as it spaces out, it's just slightly over 5.5 here. When I bring these up and put them over the nailer boards, they're going to fit right up there nice and snug, and I'll be able to tack everything in and screw it in place. And two, when I have both beams made and the dominoes cut on both sides of where the joint's going to be, this is going to be recessed down in here like this, and the other beam is going to have the same spacer block inside. I'll be able, at the seam, when I go to join them together, I'll be able to put this clamp on the inside, and I'll be able to squeeze the joints together and leave them there in the clamp while the glue sets up. Okay guys, so you can see that this really turned out great. The miters on the ends, the miter folds, or the long beveled edges, they came out perfect. And I didn't even have to mess around with any packing tape or anything like that. So from here on in, I have to do 6 more of these. So I'm going to definitely use this method here. So I'm cutting it with the, I'm cutting the long bevels with my track saw, and then I'm doing the miter fold technique using the dominoes and glue and hammering it together, and then just hold it with a clamp and tack nail it in with some brads. That worked the best. All right guys, so I'm ending the video here just because I have a lot of footage, and I don't want the video to get really long, whereas I'm going to join two of these together at the ends and then do the finishing techniques and everything like that. I want to be able to get more videos out of it and show you more tips and techniques as I go. So make sure you guys hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a video. I'm trying to get these videos out every week. If you hit the picture of a notification bell, that will allow you to get notified every single time I upload a video. I'm going to have a link down in the description box that's going to have a link to all the tools that you can purchase, or if you choose to purchase, or if you're looking for any of these tools that I use in the videos. Those tools will be on Amazon at the same price that you would normally buy them. By clicking that link, purchasing the tool through that link through Amazon, you will be contributing a small portion, which is a commission I get from Amazon to help out this channel. The more you help out the channel, the more videos I can make and the better this channel will get. Alright guys, thank you for joining me in the shop again. I hope to see you next time, where we're going to take on joining the ends with the dominoes and pulling them together with the clamps, like I showed you when I installed these inside spacer blocks or squash blocks, whatever you want to call them. And we'll work on doing the staining and spraying the finish, and then I'll have a video on the install in the client's home. All right, see you next time right here in my shop.